So good morning, everyone. Welcome to this Workforce Wednesday webinar. Today's webinar is actually a virtual training, so it is a smaller group. We did not open it up. It was only limited amount of seats. So we're grateful that you registered and are willing to participate in today's training. My name is Kirsten Bayer, and I'm from the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support at Illinois State University. And we are partnering with the Chicago Jobs Council to put together this virtual training today on strengths-based coaching. So we're excited to have you joining us. A couple of housekeeping things before I hand it off to Kate from CJC, and she can introduce herself and her colleague, Melina. I will be here for technical support along with Melina. If you need anything, Kate is our presenter today, so feel free to reach out to me or Melina via the chat. And then we are recording today, but the recording will only be for the content, excuse me. So the recording will not be for any breakouts rooms. Those will be private. The recording will be paused, or if you, an attendee, ever speaks, I will pause the recording. So feel free to be open and honest and fully participate. We invite you to turn your cameras on and your microphones and really immerse in the training as well. If you have any questions following the training, you can reach out to me via email. I can put my email in the chat. I will also put our website where the content of the recording, if you want to refer back to it or send it to a colleague, will be as well. I think that's all the housekeeping items I have. We also have closed captioning on if you'd like to turn that on for accessibility or note-taking purposes. And I believe that's it. I'm going to hand it off to Kate, and I will be here if anyone needs anything.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kirsten. Welcome, everybody. I am so excited to be here with this group today to talk about strengths-based coaching. So just to kick off with a couple of logistics, while we are here on Zoom, we do ask that when folks are not participating intentionally to just remain on mute. I think we've all been in those Zoom calls where somebody's in the background taking a phone call. So there will be lots and lots of opportunities for folks to come off mute and engage throughout the training. But when you're not sharing, if you can stay on mute. We also really encourage you to use the chat box throughout today's training for any questions or reactions or comments. Melina and I will both be monitoring the chat throughout the training, so feel free to add any input there. As well as at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little smiley face button for reactions. So you can also use that reaction feature throughout today's training. And also, just to flag for anybody who maybe just joined us, we are recording today's training, and Kirsten will be sharing that recording out with folks afterwards. So just to introduce us, my name is Kate Gannon. I'm a program manager with Chicago Jobs Council. My background prior to joining CJC has been in on-the-job training programs. So I've done on-the-job training with folks who are leaving incarceration, as well as with high school age students. And I'll turn it over to Melina to introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Melina Jankovic, and I am a program coordinator here at Chicago Jobs Council. And I'm really excited to be here and join all of you. And if you have any questions or if you have any, if you know you're going to leave ahead of time, just let me know. That way I can make sure the breakout rooms are adjusted. Any other questions, just let me know.
Thanks, Melina. And the Chicago Jobs Council, for folks who are unfamiliar with us, we are a workforce development intermediary organization. So we advocate for job seekers by researching current pressing matters for the field, developing recommendations, and sharing them broadly to help create systemic change. Some of our current focus areas and forthcoming projects include a career readiness framework, which will be an open source job club curriculum for folks who are working with job seekers, as well as an anti-racist framework to help support equity throughout the workforce development field. We build capacity in workforce development through trainings like this. So we offer trainings for open enrollment through CJC. We partner with organizations to do customized trainings. We also offer learning cohorts in different subject areas. And finally, CJC influences city, state, and federal policy related to increasing funding for the public workforce system, creating equitable pathways, and eliminating barriers to employment. If folks are interested in the work of CJC, if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to myself or Melina. We're really passionate about what we do. We love to talk about what we do. I also want to just ground us in our facilitation values. So at CJC, we really prioritize facilitation over teaching, and particularly in this coaching curriculum, we'll talk a lot about that over our next 2 days. We are really mindful that everyone learns differently, and we've tried to incorporate different facilitation methods throughout. So you'll note that in the chat, Melina pasted a link which includes the Google Drive folder. That's got your slides. If it helps you to look a few slides ahead and see what's coming, you've got that available to you, as well as your participant guide. So if you are a note taker, you can download that participant guide and feel free to mark up your own notes and make that useful for yourself. We also really value relationship building and creating safety in trainings to allow for vulnerability. There will be a lot of breakout rooms today. There will be a lot of opportunity to connect with one another. So this will be a super interactive and engaging training. Again, if you are needing to step away for a moment or you're not going to be able to fully participate in a breakout room, just let Melina know. Just give her a heads up, like, hey, I got to take a phone call. I'm going to step out. I'll let you know when I'm back. That way we can make sure that we balance that. And finally, of course, demonstrating professionalism, authenticity, and self-confidence in our trainings. So just a note about that participant guide. As we go through today's training, you will see a little pencil cup icon on some of the slides. And if you see that little pencil cup icon and it's got a page number in it, that will indicate to you where we're at in the participant guide. So when you do go in and out of a breakout room, all of your instructions for your breakout room will also be in that participant guide so that you can reference back to that when you're in your breakout room if your group gets stuck and you're not sure exactly where you should be going. So feel free to get that open so that you can follow along. And we're going to get into it for today. So our objectives for today's training, we will be recognizing and building on job seeker strengths. We'll be focusing on how to build collaborative and accountable relationships with job seekers. We'll talk about a couple of different tools that you can use to support job seekers in setting and achieving goals, as well as incorporating active listening, powerful questions, and visioning into your job seeker meetings. I'd love to pause here and invite anybody either off mute or in the chat. Is there any one of these objectives that's really standing out to you that you are excited about today? Yeah, Kat says more tools to support job seekers. Right, the more things we have in our tool belt, the better, right? The easier it is for us to be able to like flex and try a different approach if something's not landing. Great, more tools. Fantastic. So we will have 2 sessions for this training. We'll be here today until noon, and then we'll be back here next Wednesday, also from 10 to 12. So just to give kind of the overview of what we'll be covering today, we're going to focus on really getting grounded in what is that strengths-based mindset? What is our role as a coach, and how is that maybe different from other approaches that we might take at different times? And we'll really dig into what are coaching values and those key skills that we want to be developing as coaches. And then we'll have an opportunity to reflect before we close. In session 2, we will focus really heavily on active listening, creating environments where we can really tune into what our clients are saying, asking powerful questions, and how can we maybe reframe some of our relationships from, a case manager to that coaching relationship. And before we get into it fully today, we do like to start with grounded agreements. Again, this is a way that we focus on creating that safety to allow for vulnerability. So throughout today's training, again, we just want to be mindful of sound and managing our mute button. One mic means that we want to just be mindful of talking over one another. And I know that can be a little bit tricky on Zoom. So feel free to use the raise hand function. Or, if we have a couple people coming off mute at once, we can also kind of help people queue up. Land the plane just means being mindful of how much context we need to make our point. We encourage people to step up and step back. If you are someone who feels super comfortable participating in spaces like this, we really encourage and value your input. And maybe after you've shared a couple of times, just take an extra beat and an extra pause to allow some time for somebody else to jump in as well. And if this is not super comfortable for you to come off mute or participate in the chat, I would encourage you to challenge yourself however that looks for you. We also want everybody to take care of yourselves. We will take a 5-minute break at the top of the hour. So we will have a quick break for water, coffee, bio break. But do what you need to do to be successful over the next 2 hours. Everybody learns differently. Everybody's got different things that will come up throughout this course. And finally, transparent facilitation. If we have any tech bugs, if we have any issues, we will name that and we will work through it together. So if anybody would like to add anything to this grounded agreement, I would invite you to put that in the chat. Or if this looks good to you, you can go ahead and give me a thumbs up or an okay in the chat box. All right, I'm seeing a couple thumbs up reactions. Wonderful, wonderful. So we would love to get a sense of who all is in the room because the networking piece can sometimes be a little bit challenging on Zoom. So I would love to hear from folks in the chat. If everybody could please introduce yourself, go ahead and share your name, your organization, your job title, but also let us know when you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up? So think back to that maybe 2nd or 3rd grade self, and what did that kid want to be? Probably everybody's going to say career coach. Renee at Elgin Community College wanted to be a fighter pilot. I love that. Rachel at Kane County Workforce Development was going to be a ballerina. Kiana wanted to be a lawyer. Angela, a counselor. Cheryl wanted to be a teacher. Alexa, also a teacher. Cassandra, also a teacher. Adrian was going to be a nurse. Kat, a life coach. So we've got some similar things here. We've got some counselors, we've got some teachers, some coaches. Kristen, a veterinarian. Lindsay, a teacher. Ooh, Lartandra was going to be an FBI agent. Love it. Roberto wanted to be a movie director. When I was a kid, when I grew up, I really wanted to study large reptiles in the Amazon rainforest. And so I think that my parents were a little bit concerned about that. They're much happier that I settled on workforce development. So thank you all for sharing. Feel free to continue to add your childhood dream jobs into the chat. And we're going to go ahead and get grounded in our strengths-based mindset. So this is a term that's likely familiar to most of us. We've probably heard about a strengths-based mindset. And I like to start this coaching training off with the definition of a strengths-based mindset, because I think it's a good way to just ground ourselves before we get into the skills and the values and the tools of coaching. Because if we're maintaining this strengths-based mindset throughout the relationship, this will really create the environment for change as we're working with clients. So this is my personal favorite definition for strengths-based mindset. There's many of them out there, but this comes from Minnesota Neuropsychology, and it says that the strengths-based mindset is a core belief that every human has something unique and irreplaceable to contribute to our world. It starts from a profound respect for life and diversity. It starts from a stance of openness and curiosity and the unrelenting faith that we are all connected to each other and we are each worth listening to. So I'd like to just invite some reactions. What stands out to folks from this definition? Yeah, that everyone has something unique and irreplaceable. The respect of life. When does this mindset feel really easy for you? When you can relate to someone. Yeah, it's easy to have that strengths-based mindset when you have a client that you just immediately connect to, right? There are some people who we meet and we feel just immediately there's rapport, and this can be really easy when we have that experience. And just to highlight a couple other things in here in terms of what was standing out, the fact that we're all connected, that everyone can contribute and is worth listening to. Yeah, Kat says that when I'm calm and level-headed, it's
Kate, you kind of froze there.
oh,
Okay.
am I back?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you
when
were
are
needing
you challenged by this? I'll go off camera for a second, see if that helps.
Can you repeat the question again? Because it was a little frozen.
Oh, yeah. When are you challenged by this mindset? Yeah, so Angela says when people seem unmotivated. And I really appreciate the use of the word seem there, right? Because that also brings in that sometimes that's our perspective, right? That can be impacted by so many things, and motivation's a tricky thing. It's not consistent. When people are reluctant to trust that I want to be their cheerleader and I want to support their goals. Right? Often we come into these relationships knowing that we have really good intentions, that we're here to help. But the client that we're serving doesn't necessarily know that. We have to build that trust with them, and that can be challenging. So as we're thinking about this strengths-based mindset, We want to be mindful that it is these authentic and caring relationships that will create the environment for us to do this work. Strengths-based work is very goal-oriented, and it's always client-driven. The client is always in charge of what their goals are and how we're going to work towards them. We also recognize that clients are experts in their own experience. And this is important for all clients, but it is particularly important if you are working with clients who are either in systems where they've lost some of that agency. So for example, a lot of my work has been with teenagers. Adults are always telling teenagers what to do, when to do it, how to act, how to feel about something. So when we come into that relationship and respect the client's experience, and when we respect that that teenager's experience is theirs, that can be really powerful. We also recognize the client's individual strengths and power, and we work to highlight what their community and social supports are as tools for resiliency. We're also kind of shifting our focus away from correcting deficits and really focus on growing strengths. So we want to be able to identify what are the things that this person's already doing that are really positive, and how can we build on that, rather than taking that approach of where is this person lacking and what do we need to fill in. So this strengths-based mindset will inform all of the work that we do as coaches. So this is just an important thing to kind of keep top of mind. And I think to remind ourselves of, especially when we do feel challenged by it, because I want to validate it is completely normal to be challenged by this perspective. We will all work with clients who are going to challenge our ability to incorporate a strengths-based mindset. And that's when it becomes all the more important to come back to this. So this mindset will really inform the way that we coach. So coaching is the practice of partnering with clients in a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires them to maximize their personal and professional potential. And so as coaches, we are not telling them what to do, right? But we're partnering with them to explore those options. Yeah, so Angela says in the chat, working with people who have disabilities, we have to look at the barriers to employment. What functional limitations do the customers have that will make it hard for them?
Kate, you cut
Going
out.
to be some barrier. Oh, gosh, am I
So,
back?
okay. Yeah, you were just finishing the first sentence of reading Angela's comment.
So in working with people with disabilities, there are going to be functional limitations that will make it harder for them to get a job, right? And that can make it hard to focus on strengths. When we're working with systems where our clients have a lot of barriers, that can make the strengths-based focus really challenging, right? But it's about tuning in on that person, right? And really looking with that person at what are you really good at? And how do we find opportunity within that? Because I agree with you, Angela, when we're looking at all of those barriers to employment, it can become really overwhelming. It's a different population, but I think a similar experience in working with reentry, right? When you're working with folks who have experienced a lot of trauma, who haven't worked in a really long time, and there's these systematic barriers that discriminate against them, it can become very overwhelming very quickly. So when we think about this definition of coaching, this partnership, this collaboration, I would love to hear from y'all. What do you think are the foundations on which coaching is built? Renee says active listening. Active listening is huge in the coaching relationship. Absolutely. Trust, respect, and open-mindedness. Definitely. Trust, compassion, and kindness. I appreciate the way that we're highlighting that trust, right? This is very relational. Ooh, yeah, Mark says flexibility, the genuine relationship and relatability. Fantastic. Oh, Mark also says patience, and that's definitely key. So as we look at this graphic, this is our coaching continuum. So this shows a lot of different approaches that we might take with a client. And each of these approaches is important and valuable in different ways and in different times. And we've gotten this continuum kind of moving from a direction of very directive. We're really telling you what to do. We're solving your problem for you, all the way over to coaching, which is non-directive. So for example, when we think about fixing, right? Fixing is very directive. That's if I see that Melina is struggling with something and I say, you know what, Melina, just give it to me. I'll fix it and give it back to you. That solves the problem, right? But Melina didn't learn anything. So if Melina comes up against that problem again, she's not going to be able to solve it. And sometimes fixing is appropriate, right? Maybe somebody's really struggling with like a super bureaucratic process at our agency, and they're not really going to learn anything from it. And we want to just be able to move past it. We might just help them fix that. Teaching is the act of giving instruction, of transferring knowledge. If you're doing on-the-job training, you're going to do some teaching, right? I'm not going to teach you how to use a CNC machine through a facilitated coaching process, right? There's safety measures there. I need to teach you how to do it before I can let you practice it. Consulting is that process of diagnosing and then solving problems. And that power in that agency is still resting with the consultant. There's still that relationship of an expert and a learner. When we get into counseling and mentoring, that's where we're starting to move a little bit closer to this non-directive, right? Where we are offering guidance and we're partnering, but we're still going to be giving a little bit more hands-on guidance. Mentoring especially is that guidance from personal experience. So if you have shared experience with the population that you serve, right, it's really easy to fall into that mentoring. And sometimes that's really valuable, but that can also shift the focus away from the client sometimes. And then coaching all the way on the end is non-directive, that partnering for exploration and solutions. And again, each of these approaches is good in different circumstances, but what we want to be really considerate of is, where is my instinct? Where do I default to when I'm looking at this continuum? I'll say for my own experience, I really default to fixing. I'm a super action-oriented person, and I really want to solve all the problems for everybody in my life all the time. So I default to fixing, and that's something I have to be mindful of, that reflex, right? And when is that helpful? And when am I taking power away from somebody? So if you're comfortable sharing in the chat, I would invite you to share, where do you feel most comfortable on this continuum? Yeah, Kat says that they default to fixing and want their reaction to be more focused on mentoring and coaching. So if you know where your default is, that can help you move that needle. And as we consider this continuum, we want to remember that our clients are creative, they are capable, and they are resourceful, right? And when we have this strengths-based perspective, we assume that all of our clients have the capacity to identify solutions to their challenges. Coaches are the facilitators of a process that will empower clients to find their own solutions. And it's the quality of that supportive relationship between the coach and the client that will be fundamental to the success of coaching. And I'm seeing in the chat, a lot of us are leaning towards that fixing. We've got some counselors. So yeah, just really considering this and trying to clock yourself too the next time you're in a meeting with a client, right? When you are having that kind of knee-jerk reaction to a challenge that comes up, where do you land? Right? Because if we want to move ourselves more towards coaching, our first step is to understand where we're at today. So these coaching values are in your participant guide. So there are definitions on pages 3 and 4 of your participant guide. So there's no need to like scramble note take. You've got all of these defined for you, but we'll just kind of walk through them together before we do an activity based on these values. So our key values for coaching, these are what's going to frame the foundation to that relationship. Some of these values might feel really intuitive for you. Some of these values might come really easy. They might be things that you incorporate in other aspects of your life. Some of them may create some tension, right? Some of them may be more challenging for us. And that's okay. That's normal and that's natural. There also might be some strain in some of our relationships with our agency in these values. For example, choice, right? If we want to be giving clients a lot of choice in what their goals are and how they meet them, but our program might only really have the infrastructure to support one type of goal, right? There can be tension there. And I want to just name that in living each of these values, there will always be times that we're challenged by them. So our coaching values, first is respect, right? And we named this in that strengths-based definition. Coaches have a deep respect for our clients, for their expertise and their lived experience. And if we're starting from that place of respect, that'll be fundamental to establishing that relationship. Coaching is strengths-based, right? We are really working with our clients to identify what their strengths are, what skills do they already have, and how can we build on those skills? How can we build on the tools that they already have? Racial equity and inclusion. Coaching recognizes the impact of institutional racism and implicit bias within organizations, within systems, and within ourselves. So we understand these influences and how they impact our clients. And we're working within ourselves to continue to address our own implicit bias and continuing to work towards equity in these systems. We practice a fluidity of approach. Somebody named flexibility in the chat earlier. And this is really important, right? Because we're working together with our clients. And so as we are working with a client, we may need to shift our approach, sometimes moment to moment, based on what they need. This might happen in a single meeting or over the ongoing course of working together, right? If anybody has ever worked with teenagers, right? If you have a young person who comes into your office and they fling their backpack in the corner and they sit down and they pull out their phone and they just go, ugh, that's not going to be the moment to jump right in on that teen's goals, right? We need to shift. We need to adjust. We need to address the feelings in the room before we can move on. Transparency. We talk with our clients about the steps in the process. We're really clear about the different roles that we could play given the client's goals at any point in time. We're also really clear about what the organization's role is, things that we can do and things that we can't do. Coaching is peer-based. So we're, again, operating from that place of peer respect, knowing that both we and the client will have strengths and challenges throughout this process together. We offer choice. Clients can choose the level and type of support, the tools that they need based on their interests over time, and this can really change. So having that flexible approach, offering choice, even in really simple things of, at the start of your meeting saying, hey, Renee, I was thinking we could cover this, this, and this. What do you think? Is there anything you want to add to that agenda? That's a really simple thing that we can do to shift some of that power away from ourselves and let the client drive the agenda. And we're also responsive, right? We're meeting clients where they are. We are changing our coaching hats as we need to and moving fluidly among a lot of different approaches kind of as needed. What questions or reactions do folks have around these coaching values? Okay. So we are going to shift to an activity. So Melina is going to make a couple of breakout rooms for us, and you will be able to choose which value you would like to explore. So we're going to focus on 4 values today. So there will be one breakout room named strengths-based, one for racial equity and inclusion, one for transparency, and one for choice. And you will have the option to opt into which breakout room you'd like to join. And within your breakout rooms, we will ask you to share with your group what resonated about this coaching value for you. How does this value show up in our work with clients? When and how can we put this into practice? And what additional questions do you have about this value? So when Melina opens these rooms, you'll be able to opt into whichever one you'd like. Now, if you don't see the button for the room that you would like to join, just type in the chat where you want to go and Melina will assign you to that room. All right, we're seeing a few thumbs up. Fantastic. So we are going to spend the second half of today's training focused on coaching skills. So today we'll do kind of an overview of like what these skills are, some reflection on where we're kind of already at with these skills. Next week, we're going to dive more deeply into the powerful questions and the active listening component. So similar to the values, some of these skills might feel very natural to you. Some of them might feel more challenging. They might be things that we need to practice more intention with. So I want to just name that as you're looking at this list of skills, some of these you might be like, oh, heck yeah, I do that all the time. I didn't even think of that as a skill. Whereas others you might need to be a little bit more intentional about as you build. I also want to note for folks, again, there are definitions for these skills on pages 6 and 7 in your participant guide. So no need for like furious note taking as we're talking. So just to kind of walk through each of these skills, asking powerful questions is the first one we want to highlight. And this is really a key skill in the coaching relationship, is asking the right question at the right time. Powerful questions will evoke clarity. They'll often have an action component to them, and to have that kind of mindset of discovery and insight as well. Powerful questions are open-ended rather than a yes or a no or something that might have a single word answer. And the goal of powerful questions is to help our clients discover new possibilities and new learning and to strengthen their vision. We'll talk about this much more in depth next week. We've got a whole list of powerful questions in your participant guide that we'll use. But really considering questions as the way that we lead these conversations. So when we are in the coaching relationship, when we come to a crossroad with a client, instead of saying, gosh, Melina, I think you should do this, we might say, well, what do you see? What are the options and how do those fit into your goals? Right? So we're asking those questions to help the client come to their own conclusion. We also want to focus on holding the client's agenda. And this is really difficult because this means that we are letting go of our own opinions, agendas, and judgments. So the goal is to follow the client, not necessarily knowing what the right answer is or what the solution is, but instead we are taking the client's goals and the client's agendas and we're letting that lead. I want to also name that this one in particular, holding the client's agenda, can be really challenging if we are working in an agency that has a really clear agenda and it's maybe not directly in line with the client's goals. For example, in some of the on-the-job training that I've done, we're training for a very specific field. And we would have clients come in whose goals would be something totally unrelated. And so a part of that coaching process really started in recruitment. And it started with that transparency and choice of like, hey, you're telling me that you want to get your CDL. This agency can't help you do that. We don't have any resources to help you get your CDL. I can refer you to agencies that do, and this is the training that I can offer you. What do you think? Visioning is the process of helping a client create a really strong mental image that's going to inspire them to take action towards a picture of their future life. So visioning is a little bit broader than goal setting. Goal setting is very specific. Goal setting is, I want to take my CDL permit test by the end of September. Whereas visioning would be where we would help the client paint a picture of what's your life going to look like when you've been driving a truck for a year. Helping create that kind of mental image of what they really want to work towards. And then the goals will help get us there. Visioning can also be really fun if you do have the capacity to incorporate any kind of like crafting into your practice. And I know in workforce, the idea of breaking out magazine clippings and colored pencils and markers might seem a little rowdy, but I will tell you, both adults and young people can appreciate a good vision board exercise. Active listening, again, we'll talk about that more next week. But this is really that process of tuning in directly to our client and what they're saying. A lot of active listening involves managing our environment so that we can really listen with our whole body, so that we can be fully in tune with what our client is telling us, not just thinking 2 steps ahead or trying to just respond, or even thinking about that meeting that we just had with our supervisor right before that didn't really go so well, right? It's learning, it's that skill of being able to put all that out of mind and just focus on the person in front of us. Clearing is the act of giving space in the beginning of the session for the client to deal with all that other stuff that they might be bringing to session. So clearing is literally taking 5 to 10 minutes at the beginning of a session to say, Kirsten, it seems like you've got a lot on your mind today. Do you want to just vent for 5 minutes and get it out, and then we can jump into our agenda for the day? Because sometimes our clients are going to come to us and everything's gone wrong for them that week, right? We've probably all been in that situation where we have a client sitting across from us. We are ready to jump into whatever was on our agenda for the day, but they are really focused in on the childcare mishap that they had that made them late to work the day before. And they're really frustrated and they're really focused on that. We can use that transparency and that choice together to offer clearing. And it's literally saying, Melina, why don't we take 5 minutes? And I've done this with clients before where I've literally set a timer for them because I've had some clients who are real talkers. And if we're really transparent about it and we have that relationship before, I can say, Melina, I'm going to set a 5-minute timer. Do you want to just vent about your week for the first 5 minutes? And then that timer goes off and then we can say, all right, let's get into the agenda. And yeah, Angela, sometimes people can really go on in that clearing process. It's never our first move to just interrupt them and say, gosh, Melina, that sounds really, really frustrating. I want to make sure we've got time to move through our agenda today, though. Sometimes we do have to do that. Like, I've definitely worked with clients where if I let it, they would clear for the whole hour. We'd never accomplish a single thing. It would all be vent sessions. And so if you know you're working with somebody who is likely to kind of keep going, I would totally recommend tell them that you're going to set a timer on your phone, right? Don't just like low key set a timer, but tell them like, I think that we could use a few minutes to vent. I'm going to set a timer for 7 minutes. And when it goes off, we'll move into the agenda. And most of the time, that timer will go off and they'll be like, thanks, Angela, let's go. Most of the time, not quite always, but the longer you build that relationship too, and with that transparency around like, this venting isn't what we're here for, but we want to get it out, people will totally adjust to that. And that actually kind of leads us into the skill of bottom lining, which is encouraging those clients to really get to the point of what they're trying to say. The tool that I use the most for bottom lining is reframing. So if I am working with somebody and they go on kind of a long tangent about something, I'm actively listening. I'm looking for those key points. I'm trying to find what it is they're really trying to say. And I might have to stop them in this process. I might have to ask them to pause. And then I'll say, Angela, it sounds to me like what you're saying is. Did I get that right? And you can oftentimes, right, if somebody really gets on a roll with something, we might be able to wrap that up in 1 or 2 sentences. And if we nail it, if we get it right, a lot of times we can move forward. And I think too, especially if you are working with a client who you know is really chatty, I'm thinking of a very particular person that I worked with pretty recently. If you're working with somebody who is really chatty and you're finding that you're often going on tangents, you're often talking about unrelated things, straight up telling them, I'm going to summarize this, and then I think we can move on to the next thing, right? That transparency, if we're doing that from a place of genuine respect and kindness, that can be a really good tool to help move that forward. And reframing, right? So reframing is when we might offer the client additional perspectives on how they're viewing a situation. Reframing is really key when a client comes to us and things are not going well, right? And we need to be really careful with reframing that we aren't slipping into that like toxic positivity, right? Reframing isn't your car broke down, you lost your childcare, and you don't know how you're going to get to work tomorrow, but gosh, everything will probably work out fine. That's not what reframing is, right? But it might mean, why don't we take a step back? These are a lot. We've got 3 really big problems to solve. Why don't we take a step back and let's just look at step number 1. Let's just look at tomorrow. What do we need for tomorrow, right? We might reframe that problem by taking this really big, scary thing and bringing it into our next step. Reframing also means after a client has experienced a setback in their goal, right? Maybe they went to take their CDL permit test and they failed it. That's really hard. That's a huge setback, right? And we acknowledge that. We acknowledge those feelings and those emotions. And then we might bring that back around to the client of, all right, we didn't pass the test. That's okay. What did we learn about the test? If we want to move forward with doing this again, how are you more prepared now than you were a week ago? Because if we can offer additional ways to make meaning of a setback, that can really help the way the client sees that setback. Because if the client sees, I failed that test, and that means I'm a failure, they're not going to be ready to move forward. If they have that perspective of, I failed that test, but now I know what the format of the test is and I feel a little bit more prepared to take it again in a month, they're going to have a totally different approach to how they go forward from that. And lastly, challenging. Challenging is about pushing back on our clients a little bit. Right? So we might offer clients with an observation or presenting them with the opportunity to think more deeply about something. Right? We aren't necessarily just taking everything our client says at face value, but we might push them a little bit. Yeah, you failed that test. That was really hard. When are you rescheduling it for? How do we go forward from here? Right? Because coaching also involves accountability, right? And it's easy when we have a setback to just say, well, wrong goal, not doing that anymore. But as coaches, when our clients are experiencing a setback, we want to push back on that a little bit. So I'd like to pause on these skills. Are there any that folks have questions about or that are really resonating for you? So we're going to do a little individual reflection on these skills next. So if you look in your guide on page 8, you will see the coaching skills wheel. So if you are typing notes in a PDF, there's little text boxes where you could just put a number 1 through 10 to just kind of give yourself like a self-score. A 1 being, this is a brand new thing and I've never heard of it ever before. And a 10 would be, gosh, I wrote the book on active listening. So if you're in that PDF, you can just type a number. If you have a printed out copy, you could even draw a line like what's on the screen to give it a new pizza crust, if you will, to kind of rank your level of skill. So we're going to take, we'll say about 3 to 5 minutes for folks to reflect on these skills and rank yourself. We are going to do a breakout room for folks to kind of talk through what were some of your strengths, what are some areas that you want to grow. You don't have to share your scores with anybody necessarily, but we'll give folks a few minutes for that self-reflection. I'll check in after about 3 minutes to see if folks need more time, and then we'll do a breakout room to debrief them. Are going to make up the base. Our values are the bottom of the coaching pyramid. They are the base of how we do this work. How we live in our coaching values will impact how we practice the skills. So if we are starting from this place of building that respect and that strength space, the racial equity and inclusion, fluidity of approach, transparency, peer-based, choice, and responsiveness. If we really are starting with these values, these will inform how we practice and grow the skills, right? The skills are going to be the more tangible way of how we do this work, right? Being able to ask a really powerful question in the moment that wasn't already on your assessment sheet, that's a skill. Being able to guide a client through a visioning process, that's a really tangible thing that we can do with someone to help clarify, where are we going from here? Where do you see yourself in the future? So the values are how we'll lay that foundation to live in and practice these different skills. I also want to just acknowledge one more time that as you're looking at some of these skills and values, you may feel challenged by some of them. And so that is an invitation to ourselves to reflect on what am I struggling with? Where is that tension? Right? Why, trying to dig in on what is challenging about maybe building more transparency into my process. Because that'll be a very deeply personal thing for each of us to really kind of explore on our own. So we're going to do one just closing reflection. We're going to go back into some breakout rooms. And I would love to invite folks to reflect on together. First, how is this session a mirror? What self-knowledge or awareness have you gained throughout today's session? And also, how is this session a door? What opportunity do you see in your practice that you want to step into? Where are some opportunities for living those values or living those skills? So we're going to take just 5 minutes in some breakout rooms to reflect with each other on what self-knowledge or awareness have you gained, and what opportunity do you see in your practice that you want to step into. So Melina, whenever you're ready, if you want to go ahead and open those rooms, we'll take just 5 minutes for this reflection. I would love to invite everybody to go ahead and start typing in the chat. What was your key takeaway from today's session? But hold off on sending it. We're going to send them all at one time, so we get kind of a flurry of takeaways all at once. So we'll give folks about 2 minutes to go ahead and type in to the chat, what was your key takeaway? But hold off for right now on sending it. I'll cue everybody to send it at the same time. We'll take 2 minutes here. So we'll give folks got about 30, 45 more seconds to type that in, and then we'll send them all at the same time. All right. So folks should hopefully have their key takeaway typed in the chat, and we'll all go ahead and hit send and get a whole bunch of takeaways all at once. We've got asking powerful questions, the coaching skills wheel, where I need to gain skills, happy medium between holding the client's agenda and bottom lining, taking a step back to assess strengths. I don't give my clients enough credit. I struggle with holding the client's agenda, challenging and visioning. Practice being more of a wheel of coaching values and skills. A better idea of what skills to work on. Excited to learn new tips and tricks in coaching my customers. Fantastic. I want to thank everybody so much for your time and attention today. When we come back next week, we'll have part 2 of this session, and we're really going to get into some of the nitty-gritty on asking powerful questions, active listening, and ways that we can reframe some of the work that we've been doing into this coaching perspective with our clients. So thank you all so much for being with us here today. I'm going to turn it back over to Kirsten to close us out.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you to Kate. We appreciate this training, and we're looking forward to next week's as well. So next week's is a follow-up training. You were already registered. So if you registered once, you were registered for both trainings. Zoom should be sending you a link letting you know that that training is coming up. It usually goes out 24 hours before the web, like the Zoom session. So next Tuesday, you should receive that new link updated in your email. You've already received it when you registered, but it's probably buried in your inbox. So Zoom will send it again. If you have any technical issues or problems logging in next week, feel free to email me. I'm going to put my email in the chat there for you all. And then this session was recorded only for the content. So that content and the materials that Melina and Kate have provided today will be up on our Illinois Workforce Academy website. And I can put that in the chat as well. And if you would like to refer to it or send it out to any colleagues, you can do that too. And then I believe, Melina, correct me if I'm wrong, but your team at CJC is sending the follow-up email, correct?
Yes, we are sending the follow-up emails.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, I don't have anything else unless Kate or Melina, you have any last comments, and then we can close out.
No, I'm happy to hang on for a moment if anybody has any follow-up questions. Otherwise, y'all have a great rest of your day. Enjoy your lunch.